Does someone come around this side too? Come over here. Yeah. All right. Well, I see that's a moving piece. Interesting. So it's very nice to be here, and I want to thank you guys for opening up your place for me to come. I have a personal story I want to tell you. My dad was a veteran, and he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And so I've heard a lot of things about what happened when he was over in Europe back in 1944, 1945. And so my mom was a nurse with the Veterans Administration for 38 years. And she used to talk a lot about cleaning the bedpans of a lot of the quadriplegics that were coming home from Vietnam. And, you know, you learn to be a little bit humble when you listen to that when you're growing up all these years. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the vets that are here. And I want to thank all the first responders, law enforcement, and just all the citizens that are here today. This is a wonderful opportunity to be here to not only talk about how we're going to help increase educational attainment in our state, but how we're going to reinforce civic virtue and values, which really is what our state is all about. West Virginia is pretty unique. We're not the woke. We're going to keep fighting against the woke. The woke keeps trying to come back to West Virginia. We're never going to let that happen. So I'm so grateful that we can be here and have a good conversation about these issues, because I think it's important for West Virginia's future. You know, I just left the meeting, and I was over talking to one of your wonderful companies not far away from here. We're talking about different ways we can expand the workforce. And economic development is always very, very high on my list, right? As it should be. We have to lift up our standard of living. We have to grow the number of jobs that we have here, lift up our workforce participation. We also have to do some other things as well. We have to keep what's great about West Virginia, and we have to make sure that the next generation understands the importance of what previous generations and what veterans have fought for. And we're certainly doing that. I know since taking office in January, a high priority of mine has been to improve the state's education system. And I'm glad to be here with a number of the legislators who are making education a real priority here in the Mountain State. I think, as we all know, an educated population, that's the cornerstone of a successful and civil society. Unfortunately, we have many educational challenges right here in the Mountain State. And we rank too low in terms of key metrics in areas of educational attainment, in literacy, and quite frankly, in teachers' pay. We're going to begin to fix those. I am committed to being a positive agent of change. The status quo is not acceptable anymore. 49 and 50 doesn't cut it, and we're going to keep making progress on that. In this year's legislative session, I was pleased to work with the legislature, and let me tell you, they passed a number of really good bills dealing with education issues. And it's worth mentioning that, because you got a couple people in the fake news, a lot of good people in the media, but you got some out there who want to make it up and talk about what didn't happen in the session. A lot of good things happened, and I want to talk about and emphasize some of those things today. First, I was very proud to sign Senate Bill 199. It actually dealt with the streamlined process for how you deal with kids that are acting out in the classroom. Really important that teachers are going to be able to help control their classrooms and really put an end to any violent student behavior. Pretty common sense. We certainly appreciated that. I also signed House Bill 2003 into law, which allows local county boards of education to prohibit the use of personal electronic devices in the classrooms. Once again, when it comes to the classroom, we want that to be an environment for learning. We don't want distractions, whether it's taunting or violence or cell phones, that take away from the learning experience. That's especially important in this day and age when distractions are abound everywhere. That's why that's a good bill. And I'm grateful to be here with these legislators who really get that. Then we had another bill, Senate Bill 765. That established a Troop to Teachers program in West Virginia. That's great. I think we can go even further on that, because West Virginia has so many veterans and people who have served our country with distinction. And we should always fight to give those veterans easier pathways to engage in other activities where they're really going to help our citizens. So that troops to teachers provision, that's going to help the veterans navigate their way through the complex, sometimes certification process, and really get some of the classroom experience they need to really help the young people of our society, which I think is all of our goals. Then we go to Senate Bill 280. I'm looking here, hang on. We got Senate bill, House bill, Senate bill, a few Senate bills in there. Senate Bill 280, that requires public schools and institutions of higher education to display the motto, "In God We Trust." Pretty basic thing, and that's going to be upheld if it's ever challenged. We need to teach our kids about the history of our country, about Western civilization, the values, the beliefs that went into the founding of the greatest nation in the history of the earth. Our students here are going to need to remember, in West Virginia, we look out for our neighbors, but we care about God, we care about family, and we certainly care about faith. That's critical. So, a lot of good things going on, but I'm especially pleased to be here today and to be with these distinguished legislators and Pat McGee, who's really championed this issue, to talk about kind of the next step. You see, I believe that educating the next generation of students isn't just about being proficient in select subjects like math, science, and reading. It's also about teaching our kids values and ideals that shaped our country and, quite frankly, the role of Western civilization in today's world. Unfortunately, too many people don't even understand the differences between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's our job to change that. A lot of kids may know that America is a free country, but they can't articulate why. And I think that's important that we get back to that place. As a state and as a nation, we need to make sure that we're teaching basic civics, and we place an increased focus on classical education, especially in colleges and universities. So I know that when Pat talked to me about these issues, I was really encouraged because I think West Virginia, being the type of state that we are, we really prize ourselves on having traditional conservative values, and we care about civics. We've had so many people fight and die for our country, and the least thing we could do is make sure we're teaching the next generation of the importance of what people have died for in the past. To me, that was a basic. Unfortunately, a lot of our schools and higher education institutions, they've turned into indoctrination factories for radical anti-American thinking. You see it on TV. That can't happen in West Virginia. We need to make sure that students are learning how to think, not what to think. That's important. How to think, not what to think. In one of my first actions as governor, I made sure we had an executive order to eliminate DEI from our state agencies and universities. And people said, well, you maybe found 15 or 20 instances of DEI. I said, that's not very much. DEI was growing in our universities. DEI was embedded in a number of our state agencies. We know that we have to get rid of DEI and this type of warped thinking. And I'm proud to report that the universities have complied with our request, and they've removed taxpayer-funded DEI programs from their campuses. We know that's important. There's more work that needs to be done. I've mentioned to some of the folks in the legislature, there was an unfortunate amendment slipped in on accreditation bodies. That's got to change. And I work with the legislature to fix it. We don't need loopholes to allow some of this thinking to continue. When they talk about the words, equality, that's something that means something to all of us. But equity and these guaranteed outcomes that they want people to have, I think all individuals are created equal, both in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the rule of law. And that's a lot of what this is all about. Making sure we're respecting everyone as God's creatures and as we're treating them the same under the law. How controversial is that? It shouldn't be very controversial but it is when you're trying to provide preferences for certain targeted segments based upon victimization. That's not what we're going to do here in West Virginia, and I'm really proud to talk about that today. That's why it's my pleasure to be here and to ceremoniously sign House Bill 3297, good bill. It establishes the Washington Center for Civics, Culture, and Statesmanship at WVU. The goal of this new center is to place an increased focus on American constitutional studies, teaching core text, reading the influential thinkers, studying the great debates of America and Western civilization. I remember growing up, reading the Federalist Papers, page by page. You read Gibbon, you talk about the Roman Empire. We read these things because we learned from history, and we learned from the great writers and thinkers. We have to keep reminding ourselves to get back to that. If we're going to mold students into responsible leaders and informed citizens, and make sure there's a basis in Western tradition, we have to make sure that we're emphasizing that teaching in the schools. Unfortunately, some of the universities out there across the country, they've slipped in this regard. They might preach that diversity of opinion, but that doesn't always apply to professors with conservative or originalist views. That's not acceptable, and that is not going to happen in the state of West Virginia on our watch. Institutions like the Washington Center, that ensures that students in college are going to be encouraged to develop ideas across the political and the ideological spectrum. It's going to help teach them to think, to analyze and understand the underlying themes of what's going on in today's political climate. And most importantly, the Washington Center is going to present fact-based instruction on America's founding and the success of Western civilization. In next year's budget, I'm proud to report, and this begins July 1st, 2025, we've appropriated $1.5 million to the Washington Center. That's going to allow us to hire a director, establish an academic council, develop courses, and begin educating. This is a wonderful thing for West Virginia. I look out at all of you today, and I see these wonderful legislators. They're doing a terrific job. I think all of us believe that West Virginia is poised for a comeback. We really are. And we're busy doing so much to create that environment that's going to foster job growth in our state, and to be that place where red tape gets cut quicker. You can build quicker, you can act quicker, you can have great employees to work with. But as the next generation comes online and they start to work, as we encourage more people to move to West Virginia, we want to make sure we're sending a message. We want to retain people with wonderful ideals, who care about civics, who care about virtue. That's what a lot of this is about. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today and to do this ceremonial signing. I want to make sure that we can get more young people engaged and interested here in West Virginia. I see Kennedy, you're a very impressive young woman. People that understand, they're taught with the classics, and they understand, and they're going to read, they're going to expand their mind to make sure that the next generation really has a very bright future. She gets it from her mother, no doubt. But I think we're making good progress on this, and I'm so happy to be here today, spending time. Obviously, I've been spending a lot of time in the Northern Panhandle recently, and I was down in Wheeling yesterday with some of the unfortunate news. Looks like we are now up to 9 people who are officially dead from the flood. But I can tell you that the Northern Panhandle, boy, they're coming together. That resiliency, that strength, friends looking out for their neighbors, communities coming together, stepping up. That's the kind of civic virtue that we talk about. That sure, the state's going to step up, and we've sent the Guard and Department of Highways, and we're working with FEMA. You're going to have local, state, and federal government come up. But you know what makes a big difference is when communities come together and they help out. They clear the mud out of the house. They set up stands for water and food, and they're just working around the clock. They're not looking for pay. They're doing the right thing. That's a big part of what America is all about. And that's what I see when I come up to the Northern Panhandle. And I'm glad to be here today to sign this bill, spend some time with some friends, some legislators who I've worked closely with. They get it, and I'm happy to be here. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm now going to turn it over first to Delegate McGeehan for any comments you have.
A little bit impromptu, I appreciate it, Governor. Thanks for being here, Governor Morrisey, appreciate it. We love it when Chief Executive can make it up to the home of the world's largest teapot, which we're going to be showing you real quick. I know we had a little bit of controversy before we came down here because some other rival town is now claiming with blasphemy that they have the world's largest teapot, so we'll see about that. But the Washington Center at WVU, the bill that I put forward, which I'm grateful that Governor Morrisey here signed, is part of a larger initiative. There's also a committee to establish a 4-year military academy in West Virginia that I put forward as well. So it's part of this broader initiative to start to train and teach our high school graduates within these different educational institutions of higher education. Basically how education in the classics and in the humanities was taught for the last, say, 2,000 years up until about 5 years ago. And so with the Washington Center in particular, you know, there's a white marker somewhere, a historic marker, you know, because George Washington was here surveying the Ohio Valley before he came, you know, the real George Washington. And growing up, I was always taught the founding fathers were heroes, not villains. You know, I was taught about Valley Forge, and I was taught about how, you know, the founders came together and, you know, figured out this great frame of work for self-government. And anymore, you know, those founders and framers are being taught at higher education at an increasing rate that they're not heroes, they're villains. You know, and in all the humanities, really, if you want to talk about English, you'll have some professors talk about, well, let's deconstruct Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Actually, Juliet was oppressed by Romeo, you know, and it goes on from there. And so I just want something established. This in particular is established inside WVU, along with this military academy as well, which is a separate issue, to start allowing an option for students that attend higher education, first now at WVU, our flagship university, to study all these different subjects under the humanities as they've been traditionally taught, you know, for about 1950 years, probably 1980 years, really. You know, the ancients all the way up through the founding fathers, they viewed freedom and liberty in a much different way than how we view it, and I've been taught to view it today. Today, freedom and liberty is just freedom to do whatever you want, usually, right? Like some libertarian sort of ideology, that's more like a license. The way they viewed it, though, was being formed properly as you grow into a young man and a young woman, developing the 4 cardinal virtues, you know, courage, prudence, self-control, and justice. And self-control, once you develop these, you're more free because you can control your passions. You can now learn other different skills, and now you're free because you have a wider selection of options and things to pursue, right? As you educate yourself more, so to be able to really pursue being a true free man or a free woman in the pre-modern sense, that's what they defined, and I think that's really important. We've lost sight of a lot of those. You know, the founding fathers had read all of the ancients. Governor Morrisey, you know, said it right here. Washington, at the depths of despair in Valley Forge, you know, when he was down to about 1,200 men under his command, hunkered out in that cold valley southeast of Philadelphia, knowing about 30,000 British redcoats were going to pounce on him as soon as the winter lifted, staged an old play about Cato the Younger. And so that's how educated they were. And that play was basically done after the name of this ancient senator who stood his ground against Julius Caesar, who crossed the Rubicon and took over and declared himself dictator for life. But Cato the Younger, the name of this play, right, went to his death on principle to try to restore the Republic and save it. And, you know, some things are, I think, worth dying for in that respect. But point is that I think if we're going to have any hope of really stop the disintegration of our young folks, you know, into this deconstruction sort of mentality that's taught in the humanities at colleges all across the country, we need to get back to some basics, I think, because they're our future. I want my daughter growing up in a place that's going to be teaching her that there are no heroes. You know, that law enforcement officers and you know, emergency responders are actually some sort of oppressive force against society. You know, so I am long-winded once you get me started on philosophical things. I'm going to stop there, but that's basically the purpose of this. And so I'm grateful that Governor Morrisey came up here, and I can stick around and talk about anything else. God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great. Well, thank you very much, Delegate McGeehan. And now we have some other wonderful people. First of all, I want to say how happy I am. I love the Northern Panhandle, and I want to let people know that we spend a lot of time all over in all the counties of the Northern Panhandle, and we go to the tippy top. So I want people to know that. That's important for me, and it's been quite an experience getting to know so many of the wonderful small towns up here in Hancock County. Very pleased to be joined with some other real leaders in the legislature. My friend who's been just a strong force on so many different issues, Laura Chapman, any comments you'd like to make?
Thank you. And thank you, Governor, for being here. This is his 4th or 5th appearance in the past 10 days, so he really does love the Northern Panhandle, and I'm very thankful that we have a governor who has not forgotten about the Northern Panhandle. As a constitutional lawyer, I believe in the Constitution very deeply, and I think that the further we get away from the Constitution, the more mess we get into as a country. And so thanks to Majority Leader McGeehan's leadership and the governor's leadership, this is such an important bill. This is going to be crucial to educate the minds of our future leaders. But we don't have to just wait until college. We already have the ability for young people to get involved in politics. I urge everybody to encourage, I believe it's between ages 12 and 18, students to come down to Charleston and to sit on the floor during the PAGE program and learn about the process. Because every single decision that touches your lives are made in either Charleston or Washington, D.C. And so really politics, even if you don't ever want to be a politician, it's important to understand the process and to be a part of the process. And so I just encourage all of our young people especially to get involved. And this is such a great bill. I'm so excited for the Washington Center, and thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. And now let's say one of the real up-and-coming young members of the House of Delegates. He's been working hard for the Northern Panhandle and been a strong ally. And Delegate, I want to really commend you for everything you're doing, because when I think of up-and-coming members of the legislature, I think of this guy, and I'm happy he's here today, and I think we have big things into your future.
Thank you, Governor. Being one of the younger members of the legislature, being elected at 21 while I was still in college, this is an issue that was near and dear to me. To see that, I was the kid who was going around campus with a MAGA hat on, and that wasn't probably the most popular thing to do while I was there. To see us and to see Delegate McGann bring a bill forward that will open up an opportunity for students of all ideologies to come together and just get back to the basics of common debate, I think is going to be great for the future of West Virginia and of West Virginia University, and with the military academy as well. I think West Virginia's educational future is looking much better than it did just a few months ago. So thank you, Governor. Thank you, Delegate McGann.
I'd like to go to the military academy in Pancras County, just that. I'll find it.
I will say that your delegates and senators are not shy asking for things, and I have been happy to be up in the Northern Panhandle a lot, some for unfortunate reasons. I would say I was in Wheeling 4 times for the flood, but I think it's really important that we all stand strong and that there's a message of unity across West Virginia when you have communities standing up and people know we're going to be there for you, we're going to work closely with you, and I'm going to keep coming back again and again, and I want to make sure that the Northern Panhandle knows that they have a strong ally in their governor, and you've got some terrific legislators who are looking out for you as well. So I want to thank you for that, and then I'm going to sign the bill. How about that? All right. If anyone wants to come up too, get behind us, you're more than welcome. So.
My mother's standing back here and says I'm not ready for it.
Are you coming up? Come on up. You want to take a picture? Kennedy, how about you? You want to come up? All right. Great.
You guys don't mind talking up there, right?
No, come on up.
I'll look it up for everyone else.
Tell me when you're all ready. Good.
We're Hancock County, so make that signature big.
That's a great point. All right. Thank you. I wanted to show this to you guys. Here you go. Absolutely. That's pretty cool. Thank you. All right. Oh, everyone has one? Okay. And now, I think if there's any questions from the media, I can take them right here. This is from the media, anyone? TRF, TOV, anyone? Weird paper?
I think we're good.
You good? Did you get what you needed?
Still, I take it from sign.
Good? Yeah.
Did you take it still from sign?
Yeah, so the question was any updates on flooding in Wetzel County? We know that there was a horrible circumstance of 3 people that were trapped in their home. I believe it was in New Martinsville. And then people struggled to really gain access to that. But I'm here to report those 3 people, were rescued, safe. I know that we had DOH, Department of Highways, staff working really, really hard to clear the area. So we have not heard of any other injuries since. So, but, look, sometimes these rains, they come really, really fast. And we know that in Wheeling, it was 4 inches in about 40 minutes, which is rough. And I heard some statistic yesterday when I was following this that it was 3 inches in an hour. And that's just a lot of rain to absorb. So we're going to look into that. But at least as of now, we haven't heard of any injuries or any deaths, which is good. Any other questions from media?
Yeah.
Anyone? Awesome. Guys, thank you all for coming, and it's great to be back up in the northern part of the Northern Panhandle. Thanks.